Okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Dr. Leon Davis, and I'm just going to go through some elements in regards to events management in terms of the adaptations of the live events in the United Kingdom during the COVID-19 pandemic. So really the aim of this session really is to provide some background information in regards to the impact of COVID-19 on the events industry, and to explore how music events and festivals, sports events and tourist attractions have had to adapt during the pandemic, and to also look forward and to look at how pilot schemes are leading the way for 2021 and how this is going to impact on the return of live events in higher capacities in 2021 and 2022 and beyond. So just really to start from a theoretical standpoint, I've just obviously got to highlight that an event is an occurrence at a given place and time, and this is what Getz and Page really try to say, that it's a special set of circumstances, and an event usually has a beginning and an end. And this is usually, there are planned events and there are unplanned events. And some of the events I'm going to talk through today are really looking at the planned events industry, and particularly the live events industry in its different formats. So in terms of the UK events industry in 2019, the UK events industry was worth over £41 billion in 2019, which was an increase of over £3 billion from 2010 when the last report was done, and that's looking at around an 8% increase across the decade. And although it was valued at this, the whole global events industry, so outside of the UK, was actually totaled at around $325 billion. And it was expected to grow at a rate of 10.3% to over 500 billion by the end of the 2020s. So this was the forecast in 2019. And returning to the element of the UK, the top 10 leading event agencies in the UK had a turnover of more than 3 billion in 2019. And the event sector itself is a booming sector that employs over 500,000 people in 25,000 events in businesses. Okay, and these are statistics that have grown year upon year up until 2019. And the direct spend in each of Britain's event sectors, you'll see on this, you'll notice on this side that there are lots of different types of events and event sectors, that there were more than 7,000 major outdoor events that are held each year. And this ranges from festivals, agricultural shows, sporting and charity events, all the way through to village and craft events in smaller areas. Okay, but things such as the fundraising events has really, it's increased by 700 to 800% since the mid 2000s. And exhibitions in particular play a vital role in generating exports. And exhibitions attract up to 13 million visitors per year. And they generate a lot of money, as you see on the side, up to 11 billion in terms of direct spend, and over 20 billion in terms of the money that's put in also by the attendees. When we're looking at sporting and music events, this is what really puts the UK on the map. And 27.7 million fans attended music events in the mid 2010s. Okay, and we're looking at people spending hundreds of pounds and into the billions on attending events. And actually, and there's some of the landmark events, some of the world leading music events and festivals take place in the UK. In terms of sports events, it's one of the UK is one of the, well, it's one of the crown jewels in terms of the events that are actually held in terms of Olympics. There's been a number of Olympic Games, Paralympic Games. There's been a number of other mega events and international events in the likes of tennis on an annual basis, in terms of Wimbledon, in terms of football, rugby, cricket, okay, and the likes of lots of different sports and the niche sports as well, where there's a lot of sporting events that increase or boost the event sectors. So this is a large industry. But with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020, namely March 2020, this put events overall in jeopardy. And this was across the world, because as a global pandemic, the event industry took a drastic hit. So events, tourism and hospitality were in jeopardy because of the lockdowns and the repeated lockdowns through 2020 into 2021. And the whole industry itself has been put into jeopardy, particularly in terms of planning events and delivering events in a physical manner. And just going through those events that I was just alluding to there are different types of events that have come to the forefront of event creation in the 21st century. And three main types that I'll go through today are virtual, hybrid, and in person. I'll go through the steps of what virtual events are and the differences between virtual and hybrid events, and the impact that this has obviously had on in-person events since the onset of the pandemic in 2020. So in terms of outdoor events, just in general, they did lose the majority of the 2020 season, and there were cancellations in music, arts and fairs. And Visit Britain did they produced a number of reports and research into the amount of events that were lost in terms of outdoor events and how that was going to impact the economics of the UK. So we then have to think about, although there were lots lost, what did take place or what actually took place in 2020. So there were socially distanced concerts. Sam Fender's concert here in Newcastle at the Virgin Money Unity Arena. There were a number of socially distanced events in the summer of 2020. There was the London Marathon, which took place for elite runners only, and the public running of the event took place from people's home or local area. Weddings still took place, but in reduced numbers. So there was a limit at one point of only a maximum of 15 people that were actually allowed to attend a wedding and other life events. And Notting Hill Festival as well also took place, but as you will see by one of the main streets through London, this took place in a virtual manner, okay? Because if you notice here, there's only really one person actually on this street, and they had to actually adapt this and move this onto an online platform. But although I'm talking about the UK through this presentation, through this bite-sized session, in other countries where they actually got a hold, or they sort of curbed the number of cases, it meant that they were able to restart events very quickly and have full arenas or stadia across different countries, particularly in the likes of Australia and New Zealand, which you will see here with the Aotearoa Rugby Union Championship that took place in 2020. So thinking about the virtual and hybrid events, so as I was stating before, Notting Hill had to take place online. So then you have to think about, well, what do I mean by online events? What does this mean? So a virtual event is also known as an online event, and it's an interactive gathering that usually happens in some sort of internet space. Okay, and it's not restricted to a single location. You can be in all different parts of the world to take part in a virtual event, and this can allow you to be in totally different locations and in different facilities at the same time, but all obviously coming together in one platform. There were different reasons for why the virtual events became popular, particularly in the late 2000s. One of the main reasons was that in terms of sustainability and the sustainability drive, and the drive towards reducing carbon footprint of people traveling to events, in terms of looking at the principles of sustainability and sustainable development, it was looking at trying to cut costs in terms of travel, carbon footprint in terms of air travel, in terms of land-based travel. And there were threats of a global influenza pandemic in the late 2000s that also meant that virtual events became very popular. Also, businesses were looking at cutting costs because of the primarily linked to the global recession of 2008. So I think people had to, or businesses had to think about cutting costs and considering whether they could hold certain corporate business and exhibitions online to actually save on travel and actual expenditure in terms of hosting an actual event space itself. And this is where the likes of Skype became very popular. And there are lots of different types of virtual events. There are webinars, conferences, social networking, trade shows, quizzes will have all been part of them, particularly over the last 15 months. Okay, these became very popular, and they have become very popular since the onset of the first lockdown in March 2020. This has made everyone become very IT proficient over the last 15 months, and it's really sped up in terms of we're looking at the way that people were engaging with virtual platforms. They didn't expect people to be this proficient until 2028 to 2030. So it's really sped this up. And there are lots of different positives from virtual events. So for the organisers, as I was stating before, we're talking about cutting costs, extending the brand, and broadening the brand community. You can track attendees, so you can look at in terms of if they actually engaged and what they found the positives of the event were, so that you can help to improve this in future events. And you can also gain responses in terms of you can create online feedback forums, or you can gain verbal online feedback to help in terms of future events. For the attendees, there were lots of positives in terms of decreased costs and time associated with travel, particularly with people linked to people's other life or other parts of their life. And it also can help in terms of increasing education and training participation, because sometimes people were going to events and the actual learning or the engagement during the event was only a minor part of the travel or the trip. And the virtual events have sort of increased the actual collaboration and the learning nature of the virtual events and what's actually being stated. But there are issues with virtual events. There are Wi-Fi signaling issues. A certain person might dominate that virtual event, so other people don't get a chance to input their thoughts or ideas. People might speak over each other, and there's typically a lack of direction or leadership. And at times, if there's a group actually delivering sessions, members might actually be missing on the day, or there might be other issues. And then there can be issues in terms of people stepping in and actually understanding what they are delivering. But virtual events became very popular during COVID-19. They've become exponentially increased in terms of popularity, because this has been the way that we've been able to engage and communicate. And although people have said in ways that this has not been able to replace the atmosphere or the engagement between people at event facilities, this has helped people in terms of their mental health and their well-being, and actually being able to actually view people or actually communicate with people during times of isolation. So there's been a lot of different events that have helped people during the pandemic and the different lockdowns, and that people have been able to engage on via virtual events. But when you have to think about virtual events, that's usually when everyone is really in different places, but they attend online. But there are also hybrid events where we have events that have people that are actually at the event facility or an event space, and there are other people that are watching online, and that's what's known as a hybrid event. So these are events that incorporate both in-person and virtual live streaming elements. Okay, and although they were becoming very popular across the 2010s, they've grown again they've increased in popularity since the onset of the pandemic, because there's obviously not been the potential for people to gather together in large groups. So they're expecting that when people do start to re-emerge and integrate at events, that they will also continue the virtual or live streaming events, particularly for those who may struggle in terms of actually getting to an event facility, or they might not have the finances. There might be an alternative for them in terms of the hybrid events. And these things are not new. In terms of sport, This typically features hybrid events would be where at a stadium you will notice, if you're watching this on the television or on a smart media, that there are lots of people at the event watching the athletes in all genders taking part in sport. But also there's people obviously in other parts of the world watching this from a virtual platform, from an online platform. Okay, so hybrid events are not new. They've been going for 70, 80 years, but they've come to the forefront of the event delivery and having to adapt events to ensure that events can actually be seen and actually delivered in an effective way. And although there have been lots of virtual and hybrid events, there have been lots of cancellations in 2020 and 2021, and that's not lost on anyone, okay? Because there'll be a number of people who will have experienced the cancellation of different events, whether that's in corporate, education, sport, music, life events, religious events, okay, arts, exhibitions, performing arts. There's lots of different cancellations with the close downs of facilities. And the cancellation and the changing of events, there were surveys done by the likes of the PMCA about how 87% of respondents said that they'd had events cancelled, and 66% of these being cancelled as a result of the pandemic. Okay, and what this had done is it meant that 7 out of 10 businesses had actually switched to a virtual platform, and 25%, so 1 in 4 different events have actually totally extinguished, terminated their face-to-face events and have purely gone online. Okay, now in terms of an event space or an event facility, this is an issue, okay, because these event spaces are built and they are there to cater for people. So if these elements are being cancelled, obviously this puts the economy, and particularly the economy in cities and towns, at jeopardy. And in terms of this, there's been some sort of battles between the events and the insurance firms, because all these events, even though they were stating that they were going to take place in 2021, some have had to cancel. So the likes of Boomtown, which is in the picture, and the likes of Glastonbury and others have all confirmed that they won't be taking place live in a live format with full capacities because of the uncertainty and because of the fact that like I said, the insurers are not paying out for sudden cancellations. And 72% of AFI members have actually said that if their festivals do not take place in 2021, they will require more financial support in 2022. And lots of people have lobbied for this. So the likes of Sasha Lord, who is the creator and founder of the Warehouse Project and Parklife Festival, has been lobbying the government in terms of opening hospitality and helping to understand or really looking at if events are safe to take place and how this would work if they did take place. So events have had to adapt, and this is really coming to the main point of how events adapted. So during the pandemic, they've had to adapt, and although they've gone virtual into virtual and hybrid elements, there's been key ways in which they've adapted to survive or to make sure that they give people access to the events that they wanted to attend. Okay, so there's different ways this happened. This happened in terms of illegal raves, and this became very popular in the later part of 2020 when we went back into lockdown in different hotspots across the UK. Police had to obviously sort of take a hold of or sort of dilute or end the illegal raves that haven't been seen since the late 1980s and early 1990s. There was also the ways in which the NBA 2020 playoffs. So we're looking at this from a point of this is something in another country, but even on these, they actually made live fan walls or LED fan walls, as you see in the picture, around the court, so that there's people there from the UK that could actually watch those types of events. And this happened at some of the UK sporting events as well, where they put fan walls or they put screens inside stadiums and arenas to actually let fans interact with the players. Driving concerts also became very popular, so that it was a case of people were still socially distanced, they could still be in their bubble, and they would obviously not be having to mix in large numbers of people, even though there were a large number of cars there. And this became very popular in terms of political campaigns as well. Museums also had to adapt. So in terms of when you're going to museum or heritage areas, it was about, rather than just attending, you have to actually think about actually signing up or reserving certain times so that there isn't a flood of people, or it isn't in an unsafe manner when you actually enter any of these museum facilities. And theme parks did reopen in 2020 and they have in 2021. And there's been lots of different elements in terms of how the likes of Alton Towers, Thorpe Park, Lightwater Valley, Flamingo Land, and different theme parks have had to actually adapt in terms of mask wearing, temperature checks, keeping certain elements of their attractions or certain seats free, and doing everything really in a COVID safe manner. And this has also led to things such as the temperature checking, temperature guns on at entry, and also the likes of a mobile phone apps as tickets, which were popular but have become the norm now in terms of rather than actual physical printing. Also reduced capacity, which also became very popular and has seen the re-emergence in recent weeks in terms of they're being capped at 10 or 20% or 25% of capacity within stadiums and arenas, where fans or attendees were actually allowed to attend. So this is some of the ways that they've adapted to ensure that people can still attend events in person. And although these elements happened in 2020, as we went into the third lockdown in across Europe and the world in the winter of 2020 into the winter of 2021, so through January, February, and March, the UK government and some of the event organisations and the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, they sort of started to look at some of the pilot scheme events as the vaccine programme is increasing or is being administered at a fast rate. They were looking at getting people back into events, okay, knowing that the event and hospitality industry was or is suffering through the lack of engagement or the lack of fans and attendees actually entering facilities. So there were a number of events that took place or that are taking place in April and May 2021. Okay, so one of these was the FA Cup semi-final and final, and which took place at Wembley Stadium with a reduced capacity. The World Snooker Championship at the Crucible Theatre in Sheffield, where again there was a reduced capacity that slowly built towards a full capacity with COVID measures in place for the final between Sean Murphy and Mark Selby. The Brit Awards took place at the O2 Arena in London, okay, again with a number of thousands of participants who had to take negative tests before or produce or display negative tests before the event, so they were allowed entry and then had to take tests afterwards. And this also happened at the Circus, the First Dance events on the 30th of April and the 1st of May in Liverpool at the Bramley Moor Dock. So the DJ Youssef was in consultation with Prince William and some of the Prince's Trust and the government, and Liverpool became the first. This became the first event really to take place where people weren't in seated areas. So where this is a mass of people, a number of thousands of people across 2 days, with no masks, no social distancing, but again they had to produce a negative test before they were allowed entry or before their ticket went live, and then they had to take a test afterwards. So all these different events, all of the fans and attendees had to take the PCR or lateral flow tests after the event had taken place so that they could do some research on the outcomes of the event. And this was the circus event. If I could show you some of the people here. So as you can see, Fatboy Slim playing at Circus Liverpool. No social distancing, people not be on phones, people in a closed space. This is an indoor event. So I would go through all of that, but that was sort of one of the elements of the circus event. And in terms of results of the pilot scheme, only 15 out of 58,000 cases tested positive for COVID-19 following all of the events that I've just stated and some of the others at the likes of Sefton Park in Liverpool, which also held a concert by Blossoms and supporting acts. And as a result of these, the results from the pilot schemes, this pilot scheme events, it was supposedly safer going to these events than going to the supermarket or shopping, okay, because there were so few positive cases that actually occurred as a result of attending these events. And this was positively received by the event goers themselves, who provided lots of positive feedback about being able to engage, the event planners and the media and the council. So this was very positive as a result of these pilot scheme events, and this has led to events and hospitalities reopening in a COVID-safe manner through a certain system that the government has put in place in May and June 2021. So to finish, really, we have to think about how will the pandemic affect you, okay, in terms of the industry in the 2020s. So how will it affect you and anyone who wants to engage within events? So the pandemic, it has obliterated the festival seasons across all different types of events, whether that be corporate, arts, music, sport, exhibitions, life events. It's obliterated these seasons. Okay, 90% of festivals didn't take place, and over 60 won't take place this year. So there was a lot more last year, but even with the vaccine program, over 60% will not take place in 2021. Okay, and we had a quarter of adults that were actually attending festivals in 2019. So they're really trying to hope that people can actually re-engage with festivals of all different types across the 4 countries. Now, although we had 60% of fans getting live event fixes via live streams, and people saying that they're happy to pay to watch live events in this way, and that was some of the data that was collated in 2020, people are obviously wanting to re-engage, they're wanting to get back together, and they're seeing in the countries the atmospheres that are being created from live events. So people are starting to think about, when will the industry recover, when they're seeing that there are certain places where they're back to a new normal, and it's a case of when will the events industry recover across the globe. And the damage that the pandemic has caused and has forced events to adapt, it's really looking at 2022 into 2023, when there will be a recovery in terms of a full scheme of events, particularly when people across all different nations have been fully vaccinated, and any booster jabs that might be incorporated into the vaccination program. People want to go back, okay, and this is what researchers found. What will happen is there will be a massive bounce back in terms of a return to live events, and that is being demonstrated in the live events that are taking place to full capacity in different parts of the globe. Okay, and people have said that they won't want to miss theatres, music events, corporate events, educational events, sporting events. They don't want to miss these different elements going into the latter part of 2021 and into 2022. So what has it taught us? What has the pandemic taught us about events? It's about, really, through every crisis, lessons are learned. So we've got better or safer access to events and facilities now. There's more support for local and community venues. So we have the likes of community centres and public houses or pubs were vanishing or not being used, and they have seen incredible support in terms of local community. There's also been an easier access to screening and health checks. So we've had people actually taken care of in terms of getting tests and understanding how to administer tests to ensure that they are not attending events if they are testing positive, which was the access to tests was hard to come by in the early part of 2020, but there's been an easier access to this in 2021. And there's been an improved respect for the NHS and other health officials and systems in the UK and across the world, okay, and the role that they have and how critical they are in terms of keeping everyone safe at different events. Also, the building structures where people engage in these events, they've really, these event planners and the venue management have had to think about better airflow and ventilation becoming more important, and also considerations in terms of sustainability and then from an environmental standpoint has really been considered in terms of carbon footprint, things such as obviously the plastics that are used at events, and how obviously the event travel and how this can be sort of limited, or we can look towards an improved carbon footprint going forwards. Also, the use of virtual technology has also helped in terms of saving energy, and looking at printing and creating physical tickets as actually more focused towards using smart media and smartphone apps to be able to buy and purchase tickets, or actually buy different elements that would typically be at different event spaces. Thanks for your time, everyone. If anyone's got any questions, I'm always contactable by email, but thanks for listening to this bite-sized session, and hope that you can get back to some events soon. Thanks.